The movie starts off by showing a bunch of bad guys getting drugs ready to sell. Out of nowhere, a guy wearing a mask pops up. He's all set to attack and steal the drugs from these gangsters. Even though he's all by himself, this masked man somehow beats up all the gangsters, one after another. So he grabs their drug stash and is almost out of there when suddenly the cops show up. They trap him and catch him. The guy behind the mask is Terry Savage. Turns out he used to be in the Marines, and he was a big deal there, like a sergeant. The movie lets us in on his military history. He got a bunch of medals from the government for doing awesome stuff on the battlefield, especially when he was in Afghanistan. But before they lock Terry up, this police commissioner named Harvey pays him a visit. Harvey wants to know why a hero like Terry would turn into a street criminal. Harvey's words bug Terry, and he tells Harvey that it's because life after being a soldier is tough. Terry thinks his country doesn't value what he did in the war, so it's hard for him to find a good job with good pay. Hearing all this, Harvey spills the beans that he wants Terry to do a job while he's in jail. Turns out Terry's got a new mission. He's supposed to investigate a prison warden who's suspected of breaking a ton of laws. This warden's been doing bad stuff like messing with people's rights, being all corrupt, and even getting into the drug business. So, Harvey explained that the cops had a tough time checking out the prison. It had super tight security, and it seemed like the big boss warden was acting like he was above the law. They thought this warden had some shady protection from mafia guys and crooked government folks. Harvey made a deal with Terry. He said if Terry did a job for him, all of Terry's bad stuff on his record would disappear, and he'd get out of trouble. See, Terry needed this because his daughter was really sick and needed money for her treatment. That's why Terry had been doing some not-so-good things to get cash. With all this in mind, Terry said yes to Harvey's offer. Harvey gave him 10 days to get the job done. Once Terry said yes, they took him to the prison along with other prisoners. When they got there, this guy Killian, who's a lieutenant, and his helper Roy, welcomed them. Killian made sure all the new guys knew they had to do whatever the warden said. If not, they'd get hurt real bad. After that, they'd put chips in the prisoners' necks to keep an eye on them. These chips would watch where the prisoners went. Then, they put everyone in their own cells. Around the same time, Terry figured out that this prison wasn't like the usual ones. Most of the folks here were top-notch criminals and pretty darn fierce. When Terry got to his cell, turns out there was a sneaky surprise waiting for him. Harvey had hidden a cell phone under the bed without the guards knowing. Terry used that phone to tell Harvey about all the bad stuff going on in the prison. In the next part, Terry was in the dining area. All of a sudden, this guy Chris tried to start some trouble with him. But Terry didn't bother with Chris, even though he could have taken him down. The next day, out in the prison yard, Terry met a guy named John. John asked Terry to join his gang. He said it'd be safer that way. Terry said no, though. He wanted to go solo. In the evening, while Terry was in the laundry room, he saw John taking on a bunch of guys. John made it look easy. But later that night, Terry was the one in trouble. Chris and his buddies came after him in his cell. Just when things were getting rough, another prisoner stepped in to help. The guards showed up and stopped the fight. After that, they locked up the fighters, including Terry, in their own separate rooms. The next day, Killian took Chris and Terry to meet the head honcho warden, Lucas. Chris got a punishment for starting fights without permission. Then, it was Terry's turn with Lucas. Lucas said sorry for what happened with Chris and his crew attacking Terry. Right after that, Lucas told Terry to take a seat. Lucas seemed interested in Terry's background. He was a former Marine, someone Lucas thought he could count on. He said he ran a special spot called the Dungeon. Lucas offered Terry a deal. If Terry joined him as a fighter in the dungeon, Lucas would help Terry break out of jail sooner so he could be with his daughter again. After that, Lucas gave Terry a fighting outfit and said he should meet his new cellmate, a fellow prisoner. A lady warden named Maria took Terry to the cell. Surprise, surprise. Terry's roommate was none other than Bones, the guy who helped him the other night. Terry asked Bones why he was so good at fighting. Bones spilled the beans. His dad was a martial arts expert. Bones also warned Terry that the dungeon battles were tough, but he promised to have Terry's back. Later, Terry sneaked off to the bathroom to tell Harvey what was happening in the dungeon. The next day, Bones took Terry to a gym to practice fighting skills. They were getting ready for the fights in the dungeon. Bones even introduced Terry to some rough mafia groups he'd be facing, including John, the top dog or reigning champion. Terry found out that selected prisoners would have to fight in the dungeon every Friday night, and turns out tonight was Terry's turn. Dressed in his fighter gear, Terry was led to the arena by Killian and Maria, with Bones tagging along. When they got there, they spotted Lucas sitting like a king on his throne. Just as Terry entered the dungeon, Lucas explained that this place was all about wild, rule-free fights. These battles were live-streamed for all prisoners, and even on the internet for paying viewers. At that very moment, there was this big fight going on between representatives of two rival mafia groups inside the prison. The main guy fighting was John, and his nickname was Freeway. It turned out John was the reigning champ, and everyone called him the top dog. Well, John easily won that fight and kept his title. Right after that, it was Terry's turn to go up against El Papiro, the guy representing a Mexican mafia group. In the first round, Terry was a bit stiff, and El Papiro knocked him down pretty quickly. But when the second round came, Terry's adrenaline kicked in. He turned things around and actually won the fight by knocking out El Papiro. Everyone in the crowd, even Lucas the Warden, cheered for him. Lucas seemed pretty satisfied with Terry's performance. After the fight, Lucas had John come over to pick his reward for winning. Lucas said John could ask for anything. John wanted what Lucas had promised earlier, to be let out of prison. But Lucas said no. He told John he had to win one more fight before he could be set free. John got mad and warned Lucas that if he didn't keep his word, things would get messy. John said he and his crew, along with the other prisoners, would start a huge riot. The scene shifts, and now we see Terry having a visit from a lawyer named Jeanette. She used to help veterans get out of prison. She'd seen Terry's case and figured out that he ended up in this mess because he needed money for his sick daughter. Jeanette wanted to help him legally to get out of jail. But here's the twist. Terry was already working on a secret job for Harvey, so he had to turn down Jeanette's offer for legal help. Things changed again, and now Terry was in the dining area. Out of the blue, John came up and started threatening him. John wasn't too happy about Terry's win the previous night. He warned Terry to stay out of his way if he didn't want serious problems in prison. Skipping some details, Terry found himself back in the fighting ring. This time, he had to go against Dragon, a guy from an Asian mafia group. Dragon was showing off his kung fu skills, acting all arrogant, but Terry actually managed to knock him out with just one punch. This really got John mad because he thought Terry might take his spot as the strongest prisoner, the top dog. Back in the cell, Bones shared why he was locked up. He'd killed someone who hurt his younger sister. Terry felt for him and said Bones was a good guy. Terry got praised by Bones, who said Terry was a good dad. Next day, while Terry was on duty, he got attacked by a bunch of John's guys. Maria tried to help, but she got hurt instead. She got saved, though. Terry was furious and went to Lucas, asking for a fight with John. Lucas turned him down at first. He said Terry wasn't ready to take on John, the top dog and champion fighter. But Terry didn't back down. He kept pushing Lucas to set up the fight. On the flip side, John didn't actually order the attack on Terry. He was really ticked off when he found out what his guys did. Then Lucas took John's crew to the dungeon to be punished. He was mad because one of the wardens got hurt. Lucas even went so far as to kill two of John's guys as a warning for John to control his crew and follow the rules. After this talk, Lucas finally agreed to let John fight Terry. Meanwhile, Terry was training hard for the battle. But he also managed to sneak info about the prison and the violations he saw to Harvey. Terry and John started their battle. In the first round, Terry was totally in charge. This kept happening in the second round, even though John fought back a bit. Finally, Terry defeated John, who was the champ. So Terry won the top dog title. Because Terry beat John last night, now all the other prisoners respect Terry and do what he says. Later that day, Terry talked to Lucas. Lucas thanked Terry for winning, because videos of their fight sold well. Lucas made Terry his right-hand person for leading the prisoners. Not only that, Lucas asked Terry to help with his hidden drug business in prison. Terry agreed, but secretly took samples of the drugs. Then Lucas showed Terry 2 dead members of John's group. Lucas had killed them for attacking Terry. He said it was proof he cared about Terry's safety. But Terry also saw it as proof of Lucas's bad actions in prison. However, Terry wasn't interested in Lucas's offer. He just wanted to get out of prison and see his daughter again. He told Lucas this clearly. Lucas then introduced Terry to someone in his room. It was Harvey. Terry realized the whole thing was a trap. Terry finally got to know that Harvey and Lucas were actually working together, running illegal stuff in the prison, including drugs. They used his fighting skills and street smarts for their gain, but Terry kept saying no to their proposal. Things took a bad turn when they held Bones hostage, threatening to harm him if Terry didn't do what they wanted. Terry had no choice but to give in to Harvey and Lucas. As time passed, without Harvey and Lucas catching on, Terry and Bones secretly stirred up the other prisoners for a rebellion. This was easy since everyone was tired of Lucas's bossy and mean ways, and they already liked Terry. All the prisoners pitched in to help Terry's plan, and for legal help, Jeanette offered her assistance. Terry handed over all the evidence he'd gathered against Lucas and Harvey, because Harvey had forgotten to take it back from him. Next up, Lucas arranged a fight with Kaka, a tough guy from another prison. Terry struggled a lot in the first round, but he figured out Kaka's weak points in the second round and managed to win. Right after that, Terry told all the prisoners to start a riot, turning the place into a real mess. Right after that, some of Lucas's guys showed up with weapons to stop the riot, but there were too many prisoners for them to handle. Meanwhile, Lucas was trying to save himself. Terry noticed this and went after him. Eventually, they came face to face. Lucas had a gun and shot at Terry, who was about to attack. Luckily, Terry had on a bulletproof vest, a perk given to him by Lucas. He survived the shot. Not much later, the cops from headquarters got to the prison. They arrested Lucas and stopped the chaos. Jeanette had tipped them off about Lucas's crimes and his gang. The movie ends by showing Terry meeting Jeanette. She tells him he's being rewarded by the government for exposing the prison crimes involving Harvey, Lucas, and others. Also, the government will cover Terry's daughter's medical bills until she gets better. Before leaving, Terry thanks Bones for his help in prison. As Terry steps out of his cell, all the other prisoners cheer for him. He's a hero to them. Finally, Terry is released from prison and gets to see his daughter again. Meanwhile, Lucas is in a special cell, facing the consequences of all his bad deeds. And that's the end of the movie. So the moral of the story is, even in the toughest situations, stay true to your principles. Terry Savage fought for justice, beat the bad guys, and showed that a hero's heart can't be caged.